What up, y'all? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how astral projection is made by the brain. Let's talk about quantum entanglement real quick. So they know that in biological systems, there's a high level of quantum entanglement in small regions. So they can't see, technically they can't go in there and measure every single microtubule in the neurons and see them all entangled, but they can hypothesize through all the other things that they know that that's probably what's happening. Okay, so when two particles get entangled together, there's something called an Einstein-Rosen bridge that connects both of them. Okay, so it's a wormhole. It's a mini wormhole that connects them. Okay, so, and with quantum entanglement, you got to remember, it's if you have the two particles entangled and they're separated by light years, if one has a spin up and you measure it, you know that the other one has to have a spin down. But this is another thing y'all got to understand is that if you disturb one of the particles, they become unentangled. So it's not like you can do something to one particle and it can change the other particle. We take that to the Orch theory. All right. So in the Orch theory, there's all the little microtubules that make up the neurons. They're entangled together and they go into a superposition, and then your consciousness collapses them. And that's how you make a free will decision. Now, one thing that y'all got to understand is that the reason why you feel like you're this one thing inside of your head is because the entanglement of all the microtubules. So when people talk about, consciousness going outside of the brain, there is no known mechanism for that to happen. Because say some of the particles in your brain were connected to other particles outside of your brain. Okay, the particles outside of your brain would be so far apart that it wouldn't be a sufficient structure for any sort of stimulus to be perceived. So we take it from that, then you got to understand that you're in your head and you're not going to experience nothing outside of your head that will be sufficient enough for you to even notice it. So people talking about how astral projection, they leave their brain and quantum entanglement, quantum superposition and all this stuff like that. That's not what's happening. Like when you really start to understand the science of what's going on in your head, and you assume that all matter is created by consciousness and that it entangles together so it can create this feeling like as if it's all experiencing one thing and it conglomerates into one awareness, then you understand that this thing can't go outside of your head. It can't experience stuff outside of your head because it's all vibing together. Okay, to say it simply, it's all vibing together. It can't just switch its frequency and vibe with something outside of your head, because you don't have a body outside of your head for it to vibrate into that, frequency. So now let's go on to hippocampal mapping. Okay, so they've been studying this for a long time. Okay, there's a reason why you can remember where to drive without a map. There's a reason why mice can remember which way to go through a maze. Okay, they got it down to the neurons that are firing and everything, like the clusters of neurons that are firing that correlate with the internal maps inside of the head. So basically, as we go further into the future, eventually they'll be able to detect what neurons are firing and then put it up on the screen and translate it into exactly what's going on inside of the head. So what I'm saying is that if you got the hippocampal map of a city as you're driving through the city, what they'll be able to do in the future is they'll be able to hook up technology, a machine, and that can detect what neurons are firing in your head, and it will know what images are popping up in your head, and it will be able to put it on a screen. Imagine your kitchen. Just imagine that you're standing in your kitchen and you're looking at your kitchen. Now look around your kitchen in your mind. And really take a second to think about it and imagine looking around in it. That right there, what you're thinking of in your head right now, that is the astral projection world. That is the hippocampal mapping inside of the head. That's what you're going into. Now, people got different levels of memory ability. So some people got a really photographic memory where they can remember every detail about the kitchen and what's on the counter and everything. For normal people, like most of us, when we think about the kitchen, we can see like the counter and stuff like that and the cabinets and maybe the fridge, but the little details, we can't get a super precise picture of how the whole thing looks. Now, the closer you get the closer your awareness gets to being encapsulated in those mappings, the more clear it becomes. But there is still those little details that are off, just like when you're imagining it in your head. See, when you think about it in your head, it's blurry. It's kind of a little bit like hate, like you can't see it. Like you can see it, but it's kind of like it's back in your head and it's not to the front of your vision. So when I say that the way that I astral project now, what I do is when I'm tired enough, I can imagine the kitchen and I could pull that vision closer and closer and closer until I'm actually in it 3-dimensionally. So that's how I do it. So that's in your head. That ain't outside of your head. When you're imagining seeing your kitchen right now, that's not something outside of your head. That is not another, multiverse reality or something like that. It's not. It's just the neurons recreating the 3-dimensional environment in your brain. That's all it is. So what people try to say is that the imagination in your head when you're awake and what you're going into when you astral project are two separate things. No, it's not. Think about it for a second. Really think about it. I know this for a fact, but just to convince y'all, think about it for a second, man. You can see this inside of your kitchen in your head when you're awake, and then but you're gonna tell me that when you go into it in a dream, that's a completely different thing. Then what the fuck is that shit when you're imagining it when you're awake? What is that? It's the same thing. It's just that your awareness is that it's just that certain parts of the brain turn off and certain parts of the brain become a little bit more active when you sleep. And that's what your awareness ends up experiencing mostly. So you got to remember, this whole thing is a dream and a dream inside of a dream. It's a brain inside of a brain inside of a brain. Now, we're not God. Okay, we can't just take our awareness and just shift it to different, place, especially not in our waking reality. Like when people say they do remote viewing and they can actually see things and get information outside of their head, you have to go back to the Orch and to quantum entanglement. What the fuck external body are they entangling into to receive that information through the Einstein-Rosen bridges? What type of ghost brain body do they have floating around that they would be entangling with? There's nothing there. For you to actually receive an external stimulus that would be sufficient enough that you would be able to actually observe the outside world outside of your head, you would need so much matter put together in such a sophisticated way. You would literally need eyeballs and a brain. So if you have nothing there, if there's nothing there, you're not going to see it. And people could try to talk all they want about how this is a mind and you're tapping into, your higher self, your higher brain. No, you're not. You're not. It's the hippocampal maps. The evidence is right there.